Hello and welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. If you're new to the channel, if you've just stumbled across it this very day, why not think about liking and subscribing? There's all sorts of cult stuff here, fantasy films, retrospectives, unboxings, physical media stuff, all sorts of caper, and the odd new film, which I talk about here on the channel. Even though it's mainly a niche retro sort of outlet, I do tend to talk about new films as and when I can and when I can get them through. Yeah, if you're new, just think about liking and subscribing. You can do it very easily by clicking there or clicking on that QR code with your phone, and you can join my community, my growing community. About 46% of people who watch the channel aren't subscribers. That's not a bad metric by YouTube standards, but it would be nice to get a few more of you on board. If you're casuals who drift in and out, it's all free. It's not one of those subscriptions where you have to put in your credit card details. I mean, you can if you want to, but you don't have to. It's all free, so you might as well just get on board. As some of you may know, I'm creeping towards 3,000 subscribers. I'd probably get there a bit quicker if I posted more stuff. I'll come back to that in a moment. But yeah, we're creeping towards 3,000 subscribers, which has been my aim and ambition since I got over 1,000 subscribers about a year ago. When I realised that the channel was starting to take off a little bit, I thought perhaps I can reach a certain point. So it would be nice to get to 3,000. At the moment, at the time of recording this, I'm 70 people away. So if you're thinking about subscribing or you just fancy doing an old bloke a favour, just like and subscribe. It'd be fantastic. Right, talking about the channel, and I do apologise for not having posted very much in the last couple of weeks. 2 videos last week. I tried to get 3 up a week, but I've been thwarted in my plans to do one particular thing. The new Blake 7 Blu-ray box set is out now. It's out now. It's Monday as I'm recording this. Mine has been dispatched. It is particularly annoying in terms of buying physical media online because you never know with pre-orders who's the best to go with. You hear stories from people about Amazon are the best. Oh, they're fantastic. They get them out on the day of release. HMV, Zavvi. And over the years, I have tried all of these various online retailers, and they all give different performances at different times. I think I had Blake 7 Season 2 on order from Amazon, but when my Doctor Who Season 13 set arrived a couple of days before release last month, I thought, oh, Zavvi must be the boy. So I cancelled that order and ordered it with Zavvi. Now the order's been processed, it's been sent out, but Royal Mail are waiting for it. The upshot is that I won't get it till about Wednesday. So I shall have to make a judgment call then on whether it's worth doing an unboxing video, because most of you on this channel who are interested will have your copies by then or be waiting on them. So I don't know if there's a lot of point in doing an unboxing. I might skip straight to the review, which will come towards the end of the week. So it depends when it turns up. And just a couple of other things. I just haven't had a chance to sort of get in here and sit and do stuff. But that's all going to change because I'm going to get at least 3 videos out this week. And I'm hoping to keep that momentum going permanently for the channel. In regards to this review, yes, I'm reviewing a new film. And again, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that me and new films on this channel don't necessarily go very well together. Reviews of new films don't get a lot of traction, don't get a lot of views. And as I've said before, I understand that because there are experienced film reviewers out there. Not that I'm an inexperienced film reviewer, but there are experienced YouTube film reviewers who have hundreds of thousands of subscribers and viewers, and their opinions are the ones that people go to first. So I understand that as a relatively small channel, people aren't really going to seek out my opinions on new films, but I do like to talk about new films. So I've tried a few different ideas here and there. Most recently, the Films of the Month series, which will be coming to an end at the end of this month, unfortunately, after 6 episodes, because the viewing figures have just dropped like a stone. The latest one, episode 5, which went out end of October, has had the lowest figures of all. So it's quite clear that they're not attractive videos to you. But I do want to talk about films now and again, and I particularly want to talk about this film. So what I'm going to do is, I think, do the odd video, quite short, about films that are very striking and have a sort of profound effect on me, or just strike me as particularly astonishing films. Not your bog standard Marvel films, your superhero films, your horrors, your thrillers and so on, but something a bit special. So today I want to talk about Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein. Before I do, stick around if you're a fan of Jerry Anderson's UFO, because there'll be a little bit of something about that at the end of the video. And also if you're a fan of 1960s monster movies, particularly Gorgo, which I reviewed a couple of months back, then you might also want to stick around. There might be something to your advantage at the end of the video. Right, Frankenstein. Right, Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein is currently streaming on Netflix. It's also still showing in some cinemas. And I would say to you, if you are minded to see this film, if you can, please try and catch it on the big screen. I saw it there last Tuesday, and it is the way to see any Guillermo Del Toro film, but particularly this, because it is a beautiful piece of cinema in its own right, regardless of what you think of the story and the film. It looks absolutely beautiful. You need to see it on a big screen. Now, I've got a decent sized TV in the house. I've got a 100-inch projector screen here in the cinema room, but I think it is still the sort of film you need to see on a proper cinema screen, because it is a cinema experience. It's a theatrical experience. This is a Netflix film. It's been funded by Netflix. It was made for Netflix. Guillermo Del Toro is, I believe, in a deal with Netflix. He did his version of Pinocchio a few years ago, which was excellent. And I think it's a shame, because he is a filmmaker, a proper filmmaker. He doesn't just churn out action films to go on streamers. His films are works of art. Never more so, perhaps, than with Frankenstein. We all know the story of Frankenstein. It's the classic of Gothic literature based on Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. It's been filmed umpteen times. There's been stage plays. Everyone knows the story of Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein or Baron von Frankenstein, and his creation, the monster or the creature. It is a well-worn horror story. I think it's interesting from a symmetrical point of view that the year 2025 started off with Robert Eggers' extraordinary Nosferatu, the take on Bram Stoker's Dracula, and comes to an end with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein being revisited. It just goes to show that these Gothic horror stories have their reputations for a reason, and they are endlessly revisitable by filmmakers across the generations. Like Dracula, Frankenstein is a story which offers a lot of opportunities to filmmakers. They don't have to follow the story strictly, because there are little avenues and little tributaries that the story can take creators into to tell different versions of the story, go off in slightly different directions. There are lots of narrative opportunities within the original stories. I haven't read Frankenstein for years, and I know it's quite a stodgy book. Del Toro, famous from classic films like Shape of Water, Pacific Rim, the brilliant Pan's Labyrinth, which I really must rewatch one of these days. He's wanted to make Frankenstein since he was a child, and I think he's become a filmmaker because of Frankenstein. It's a story that chimed and resonated with him as a youngster, and it was his obsession to bring this story to the screen, and he's been working on it for a decade or more. Ideas were put together, scripts were written, designs were created for the look of the creature and so on. But he's finally done it with this extraordinary film, which I highly recommend, because it is just a great film, and this is why I say you should try and see it in the cinema. It does very much follow the line of the story of Frankenstein as we know it, and people often conflate Frankenstein, the creator, with Frankenstein, the creature. But the film is about Frankenstein. In this particular case, an egotistical and obsessed scientist played by Oscar Isaac, who's experimenting in creating new life from dead life. And his experiments here have very dangerous consequences. The film stars Oscar Isaac, as I said, as Dr. Frankenstein. He's an unusual actor in that he never looks the same in two films. Because he's often layered under makeup or beards or prosthetics or whatever, he never looks the same twice. And even when you see him as himself, it's hard to say, oh, that's Oscar Isaac, because he's a bit of an everyman actor. He can do so many different roles and play so many different parts. He brings something new to every part that he plays. Playing the creature, who is not a monster in this film, we have Jacob Elordi, who brings a real physicality to the role of the creature, and Mia Goth, who plays Elizabeth, who is the potential sort of love interest for the creature and Victor Woodhope himself. But in this particular version of the story, she's not interested in Victor. She is engaged to his brother. Mia Goth plays the part, and it's interesting. She's become quite highly regarded over the last few years. She appeared in a number of horror films. I think she was in X and Pearl. I noticed her in David Cronenberg's son's Infinity Pool, in which she gave a great performance. I'm not entirely sure she's right for the role of Elizabeth in this, because there's something about her look. She looks like a very 21st century girl. And her performance, I don't think, quite connects with the character in the way that you might want it to. And that's really the only flaw in the film, I think, because it's powered by these two extraordinary performances from Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi, who really give everything to the characters of Frankenstein, this tortured, obsessed man who wants to exert power over life an obsession which dates back to the death of his mother when he was very young. He felt cheated by the death of his mother, and he wants to show that he can conquer the whole concept of life. And Jacob Elordi is this haunted patchwork creature that didn't ask to be born, and it finds itself thrown into a strange world that it can't really understand. The film has an interesting narrative structure. It starts off with a sailing vessel that's ice-locked on its trip to the North Pole. Despite the best efforts of all the sailors on board, it's stuck fast in the ice. It reminds me of that TV series The Terror, based on the true story of the Erebus, which was trapped on a voyage to the Northwest Passage, the turn of the previous century. And suddenly they come across a man, a disheveled, beaten man. This is Victor Frankenstein. They also come across a creature which is in pursuit, which is possessed of enormous superhuman strength and ability. On board the ship, Victor Frankenstein tells the captain of the ship his story, and we go back to the beginning of his life, the death of his mother, and how he tries to come to terms with that, and then him as an adult, desperate to conquer death and to bring life to dead flesh. He does this with the help of Christoph Waltz's character, who is this philanthropist who helps fund Victor's experiments. He sets him up with this huge, dark, gloomy, dank castle, which could practically be called Castle Gothic. It looks so classically of that era. And there they work together to try and bring life to this creature that Frankenstein has put together from bits and pieces from bodies strewn about on the Crimean battlefield. He's successful and he gives life to this creature, but it's not very communicative. The only word he seems to be able to say is Victor. And Victor himself gets more and more frustrated with this. He's furious, he's angry. The creature has incredible regenerative powers. He notices that if it's injured or suffers some sort of damage, it heals itself very quickly. But the creature will not communicate, and this really frustrates him. Elizabeth comes to visit, and she seems to forge a bond with the creature, but Victor is more and more frustrated, and he decides to destroy his creation. He sets fire to the castle. He hears the creature cry out his name as the castle is burning to the ground, and he decides to rush back to save the creature's life. The creature, however, escapes and starts his own adventures into the wilderness. And the story then takes a different tack as the creature is now aboard the ship, and it tells its story, the story from its perspective of what happened after it escaped from the castle. And this is where it follows a familiar path from the book, where he meets up with the blind man. This is the character played by David Bradley. He and his family live in this cabin out in the wilderness. He comes across this family and he doesn't exactly befriend them, but he helps them. They don't see him. They don't know who he is. They think he's the spirit of the forest. And he helps them by helping to build fences and catching food for them, but they don't know who the creature actually is. When most of the family go off for the winter, the creature stays behind, and David Bradley's blind old man character educates him, helps him to read, helps him to speak, and he becomes more civilized. Eventually he's forced to move on, and he comes into conflict with Victor towards the end of the film. It's been a bit haphazard, my discussion of the story of the film, because I don't want to spoil it too much. But you will see that it does very much follow broadly the lines of the original Frankenstein story, the creation of the creature. What is interesting, I think, in this particular version, though, is not only that it's a fantastically handsome production, the gorgeous set design and the gorgeous cinematography, the terrific soundtrack music from Alexander Desplat, but Del Toro, who wrote the script, he's looked at things from a slightly different angle. And I suppose it's an interesting, if not entirely surprising angle, that here it's Victor who is the monster. The creature is the creature, but he's not the monster. He looks unusual because he's scarred and his body is hairless and he's very clearly not a human being. But he isn't monstrous in the way that, say, Boris Karloff's monster from the classic Universal films was, or even Christopher Lee's slightly wide-eyed creature in Hammer's 1957 film. He's not monstrous in that respect. He's a creature, and that's the difference that the film makes. It is Victor Frankenstein who is the monster because of the way he treats the creature when he's created it, his lack of patience with it, what he does afterwards throughout the story. Frankenstein here is the monster. Dr. Frankenstein is the monster. And our sympathies are pretty much always with the creature as it tries to find a way in a world that it didn't ask to be born into. It is a wonderful film, and it's no spoilers, it is going to be in my top 10 films of the year, because even though Films of the Month is finishing, I'm still going to do my Films of the Year because I do quite enjoy that sort of roundup of films and TV. But it really is a magnificent film. It's romantic, it's gothic, it's haunting. It's not a horror film. If you're expecting a horror film, there is some violence. There are certain scenes. It isn't full of jump scares, and it isn't a film that has a creature that sets out to scare the audience. It's a film that very much wants the audience to care about the creature and feel contempt and perhaps even pity for Victor Frankenstein, who has created this miracle but doesn't understand it and can't really communicate with it. It is such a good film, and if you can only see it on Netflix, then do so, but you really need to see it because it is such a fantastic piece of filmmaking. I am frustrated that an artist like Guillermo Del Toro, his films now end up on streaming services, and even though they do make their way into cinemas, they're not getting the wide release that they really deserve. If you think of Shape of Water, which I think was an Oscar-winning film a few years ago, it is such a shame now that a film that is so beautiful as this doesn't have a big theatrical release. It is such a shame. But it is a great film, and I highly recommend you go and see it. If you think, oh, I've seen Frankenstein, I know the story of Frankenstein. This is, I think, the best version. I do like the Hammer version. That came out on 4K. You might remember my unboxing video a few weeks back. And I have watched the film, and it is great telling of a story, thanks to great performances from Peter Cushing. And, of course, Christopher Lee is the creature, the monster. But this is something different again. It's got everything that modern filmmaking technology gives you. I think most of the visual effects stuff is practical because Del Toro likes to work that way. I'm sure there's little bits of CGI here and there, but the scenes out in the frozen waste in the North Pole look cold and biting and harsh. And the scenes in the castle, it's dank and it's crumbling and it's cold, unwelcoming place. It's just a fantastic film. So I can say no more about it than that, and you really should try and catch up with it if you can. I can't help giving it a 10 out of 10 because I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. Fantastic film. Right, couple of other things to mention. If you are a fan of Gerry Anderson's sublime UFO TV series from 1969 to 1970, you might be interested in picking up a copy of a new magazine which has an interview with its star, Ed Bishop, in it. It's an interesting interview because I interviewed him back in 1986 when I was just starting to get into magazine writing and sort of journalism and stuff. I was very lucky to have a chance to catch up with Ed Bishop and did an interview with him, and it was done by tapes. I would send him tapes with questions and he would send the tapes back with questions. It was a different time. We didn't have Zoom in those days. And that interview never saw the light of day. It just sat on my files for years. But it was published in a issue of Infinity magazine. You might be familiar with Infinity, the cult magazine, which deals with science fiction, fantasy, and lots more beside. It comes out every month. And it was published, thinking about issue 16, something like that. We're now on about issue 86, so obviously that's quite a while ago. But there's a new magazine out, which is an Infinity Magazine Special Annual, Standby for Action, an FAB Gerry Anderson special. In fact, it's a FAB, I'm sure it should be Anne, never mind. And it's full of Anderson-related content. I don't know, I haven't checked up to see if it's just all reprints of material from earlier editions or if there's any new stuff there. But the reason I mention it is because that very same Gerry Anderson interview has been reprinted in this particular magazine. And as soon as I can find it, I will show you it. Here it is. Yeah, here we go. Ed TV, it was called. It sits there. The layout is exactly the same as it was in the original magazine. And it runs across, I think, about 4 pages with a nice illustration there. So if you're interested in reading that, not just because I wrote it, but because it's UFO and it's a great show, this is available in T.G. Jones, as I think Smith's is now called. It's only available there, or you can pick it up online from the publishers, Ghoulish Publications. And it's full of lots of other Anderson stuff, as I said. They've done a lot of Anderson stuff over the years, so I don't know if this is all reprinted material, if there's new stuff. But I think it's a good magazine with a lot of handy Anderson content in it. Last thing to mention is a new book or magazine, or extended magazine, Bumper Magazine, which has just been released. A few months ago, I did a video on the early 1960s British monster film Gorgo, which is a sort of a British version of Godzilla. The video was quite popular, and a writer called Anthony Mackay reached out to me and told me about a new magazine which is coming out and is now available. If you've heard of Hemlock books, and I'll put a link to them down here, Hemlock books do a lot of very cult books and magazines. They particularly publish a magazine called Little Shop of Horrors, which has been running for years apparently, which often deals with one particular film or one particular title in a lavish, in-depth magazine format. And they've also published some books. Anthony reached out to tell me that issue 53, the penultimate issue of the magazine, which is in its 53rd year, incredibly, the 53rd issue is in fact now available. And it is a volume entirely dedicated to the making of Gorgo. It's 270 pages, which I think is twice the size of a normal copy of the magazine. And it's written and researched by Anthony Mackay himself, introduction from Joe Dante. And it covers the making of the film in forensic detail, newly unearthed production information on the 61 Technicolor dinosaur epic, visual effects groundbreaker for its time and the colourful producers that made it happen, the Wild and Woolly King brothers. That's available now. I haven't got hold of a copy myself yet, but I would like to, so I'm hoping to track that down or get hold of a copy soon. So if you want one, you need to go over to Hemlock Books for the latest edition of Little Shop of Horrors magazine, issue number 53, which is a Gorgo special. And if you have the same fondness for that film as I have, you will probably be interested in picking that up. Right, thank you for watching. More stuff coming up very soon this week, including something on Blake 7. Whether it's an unboxing or the review of the whole set when I've digested it all, it doesn't look as if my set's going to arrive now before Wednesday. And by then, I expect most people will have received their copies and be quite familiar with the content. So it's probably not a lot of point in an unboxing, but we'll see. And loads of other things. There's an interesting TV retrospective coming up for a show that was recommended to me by a couple of my subscribers a while back, and some new Doctor Who stuff. There's all sorts of stuff to come, so should be at least 3 videos a week coming up from now on. Thank you for watching. As I said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you soon, but until I do, keep checking the stuff.